Good morning, everybody. Good morning, members. Today's meeting is being filmed for live and subsequent broadcast by way of the Council's internet site. The images and sound recording may also be used for training purposes within the Council. As you'll see from the agenda papers, generally the public seating areas are not filmed. However, by entering the meeting room and using the public seating area, you are consenting to being filmed and to the possible use of those images, sound recordings for webcasting and or other training purposes. Proposed public speakers have been made aware of the broadcasting arrangements prior to this meeting. Would members please use their microphones to contribute to the meeting, and please remember to switch off the microphone when you have finished. Members dialing in remotely, please turn on your camera for the duration of the committee as required by the Planning Department. Also, could you ensure that you refrain from using the mobile devices during the committee and that any devices are on silent? We have apologies from Councillor Howells and Councillor Perkins.
And Councillor Harvey.
And Councillor Harvey. Sorry, and Councillor Harvey. Do we have any declarations of interest?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if you can hear me. It's Will Rowley. I can't hear the word you're saying on my equipment. I don't know if any other members having difficulty or is it just isolated to myself?
Can all members raise their hand if they can hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I can hear you fine as well.
It's just you, Councillor Rheoli. Right.
Councillor, can you hear me?
No.
Can we
Mr. Chairman, what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave and log back in. Is that okay?
Sorry about that, everybody. Just give Councillor Rheoli a minute. If all members would like to have a look at the previous meeting, on pages 3 to 6. Councillor Rheoli, are you okay? Can you hear me?
If you're speaking to me, Mr. Chairman, I can't hear you.
No. Well, I'm going to have to carry on. If you try and find, if you can have a look at your dials or something on the computer to see if there's anything switched off. You can't hear me, though, can you? Oh dear. I think we're going to have to carry on without you. Can you text me? Yeah, we are called. Somebody sending him a message, is it? Okay. I'll carry on, members, and somebody's going to be in touch with Councillor Rheoli. They're sending an email. Okay, moving on. Application number 23/0971. The site is 94 Otherine Avenue, Newport, MP20 5DE. The presenting officer is Adam Foote, West Area Development Manager. Over to you, Adam.
Thank you, Chair. Just share my screen. Yes, the application site comprises of an undeveloped parcel of land to the rear of number 94 Altrinne Avenue. Access is being proposed to be gained via all-terrain view. The extent of the application site is outlined in red on the image shown on the left-hand side. The application site is located within the defined settlement boundary and within a residential area, and does benefit from outline planning consent for the construction of 2 dwellings. Members may remember this application as it was previously reported to Planning Committee at the request of Councillor Fowler, who raised concerns over the development as proposed on the site in relation to its scale and design. The committee resolved to approve the application. However, when the Section 106 agreement was tried to be completed, it came to light that the extent of site ownership was slightly different to what was previously proposed, and the red line boundary has therefore been altered. So, members will see from the image on screen this, if you can see my cursor, where the boundary kicks in slightly. Previously, this was shown as a continuous line with this area here. So originally this was proposed to come straight across, whereas now it kicks in, and that is the extent of ownership on site. That is the only change that has arisen since the previous submission and the resolution to approve previously. So that's the reason this is being reported back to committee, is to with a recommendation to approve, to hopefully gain a sort of second resolution to approve, subject to these amended plans and the amended site boundary. So the reduced area relates to house number 1 as shown on the proposed plan. So it reduces the garden depth from 10.7 metres as previously proposed to one that ranges between 8.95 metres to 9.3, as there is a slight slope in the extent of that area. So it is noted that this would fall below the adopted standards within our supplementary planning guidance in respect of the overall depth from the rear of the proposed dwelling to the extent of the boundary. However, the overall area of the garden proposed would exceed the amenity standards that the SPG requires, and the overall back-to-back relationship of the proposed dwelling and the existing at number 96 Altering Avenue would exceed the required standards. So overall, we are satisfied that the development with the reduced sort of garden area to the rear of house number 1 would still be acceptable, would still maintain a sufficient level of amenity and privacy, avoid any unacceptable overbearing impact upon the existing occupiers of number 96 Altering Avenue. The design is unchanged. It is as previously proposed, as reported previously to the Planning Committee. So it comprises of a contemporary design, parking at the lower level, which is sort of a common feature within the houses at Altering View, and a contemporary design arranged over 3 floors. Here are some sort of 3D imagery of the proposed development in relation to the neighbouring properties. And then this is purely for illustration purposes as to show the previous relationship. So unfortunately the image here seems to have cut out the rear, but it's essentially was showing the previous relationship with a consistent boundary along the rear of both of the proposed dwellings, whereas now we have, as I've said, this kick-in, therefore reducing the space. In terms of highway safety, the Local Highways Authority are satisfied that the proposal is acceptable with sufficient levels of car parking. Some concerns were raised by the landscape officer. However, this would be unchanged from the previous, and we consider these have been overcome. In terms of biodiversity and ecology, the site has a limited ecological value, and therefore a condition is suggested to obtain a net benefit for biodiversity on site. So again, the application is re-reported with a recommendation to approve with the reduced overall site area consisting of this essentially reduction to the rear of house number 1. So the application is recommended for approval subject to section 106 and conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Adam. Before we move on, could I just ask if this last... Okay, sorry. I'll open this up to the members. Anybody wish to? Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. One question. The officer said that they're quite happy to accept the amenity areas on a new development. How does that affect the amenity areas on the developments which are already there? Obviously, it's going to reduce their amenity, but does that still comply with our legislation?
So, with regards to the existing properties, their amenity areas would still be of a suitable scale for each individual property, and the relationship between the proposed property at Alterine View and the rear property on at number 96 and 94 Alterine Avenue would be in excess of 22 metres, so that does meet our adopted standards, which is why overall we consider that it wouldn't have an unacceptable adverse impact upon the living conditions of the existing occupiers.
So what developments are already in those two properties which are already there? Because the footprint shows to me as though there's further developments at the rear of, was in 94, I believe, the larger one.
Just a second, I'll reshare my screen.
Yeah. 94 is the one on the right-hand side, I'm assuming, yes. So what's all those squares at the rear of the property at 94? Is that garages or what? Obviously, if they are developments of some sort, then they're not going to be able to have any green spaces there, are they?
So with the rear of number 94, so if you can see my cursor, the brown area here is a garage, and they have a further extension of the rear of the garage with a flat roof. This is a grassed area, and this is a grassed area, and then they have like a paved patio at immediately to the rear of the dwelling. And then with number 9, I was
trying to identify that those squares weren't developments, only the garage, the other is green spaces.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Councillor Horton, do you have your hand up?
Thank you, Chair, yes. Am I right, essentially, in my understanding, is the only change to this application that we passed last time is just that slight movement of that red line?
Yes, that is correct. So the only reason that this application hasn't... Oh, sorry.
So yes, thank you. In that case, can I move that we vote on this, please? Because we've already done it once.
Yes, if everybody's finished speaking on the application. Councillor Rheoli, can you hear me now? Councillor?
Yes, Chair. I've got to go on to my my iPad, but I wasn't here for the whole presentation, so I'm not going to vote on this.
Okay, Councillor.
I've read it. Unless you, yes, okay. So I'll leave it there. I'm trying to sort out my laptop at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Can we have a show hand proposer for the officer's recommendations? Yeah. Seconder, Councillor Pym. Okay. All those members, raise their hands. That's unanimous. Carried. Thank you all. Now, I'd like to go back to the minutes of the previous meeting to show that there's a true account. Can we have a proposer? Okay, Councillor. A seconder? Yeah, Councillor John. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Move on now to a presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the next report is basically being brought to you as the Planning Annual Performance Report. So this is Newport's second annual performance report since COVID, which looks at the performance of the Planning Department for 2024-25 against nationally set performance indicators. These were set pre-COVID, and Newport's performance last year, just to give you a bit of a benchmark in terms of how we're doing. At the present time, it's not mandated by Welsh Government, but the Council has sought to provide members with an update on performance decisions, and the report will be published on the Council's website. So prior to COVID, the Welsh Government would provide all local authorities with an all-Wales picture to enable local authorities comparison with each other and across with an all-Wales average. This has not been possible since 2018-19, so we've used that average just as an indicator. It's out of date, I fully appreciate that, but as I said, we used it last year and I see no reason this year to change it. I've got to highlight at the outset that the nature of the performance indicators means their focus is on decision speed and time rather than customer service and focusing on whether or not the outcomes are better effectively. So as officers, our priority is always to try and add value to schemes where possible, and this may result in taking longer to determine applications. So based on the performance of information, it is in the report, I consider the authority to be performing well overall. At a high level, the performance is ranked as good against 12 indicators, fair against 2, and there are 4 in need of improvement, although 2 of these cannot be improved as they're to do with the timescales about the local development plan. So whilst they might be in need of improvement, I can't do anything about them. There is a slight decline on the previous year when there was 1 indicator that was fair and 3 that were in need of improvement. But as I said, those, I'll come to it. One of those is a cost decision, one's to do with a replacement local development plan. And the report is viewed in the context of the challenges, opportunities and priorities we as an authority have faced over the last year. So it's a really good opportunity to look at what we've done, look at timescales and identify some areas for improvement. So, for the purpose of this report, performance is analysed across 5 key aspects of planning delivery, and these are set out in the Welsh Government's planning framework. And I'll start with plan making. So, the table shows the various measures associated with the topic. The first 3 columns indicate what the Welsh Government considered to be good, fair, and in need of improvement. It's a RAG rating, red, amber, green obviously being the best. So the green column at the end of the table, the light green, Newport LPA 2024-25 is last year's information. The 2 white columns that precede that are the previous 2 years. So it just gives you a bit of a flavour about how we're doing, whether there's been any significant change in the direction of travel. So, very briefly, you'll be aware we've got an adopted local development plan, which runs until 2026, and we're currently progressing the replacement local development plan, which will run until 2036. This is behind the revised delivery agreement. It is more than 18 months behind it, which is why one of those categories has now changed. The second one down, you'll see it's gone from less than, or 12 and less, to 18 plus. We did have a revised delivery agreement agreed with the Welsh Government. There were issues historically in terms of appointments at a senior level, and there have been recruitment issues in the team since. So this has been one of the main impactors on why we are behind schedule, but we're not alone in that. Other authorities across South Wales and Wales as a whole are as well. So as I said, I can't change that. That will always be red. Every report from now on in, that second indicator will remain red. We are required to submit an annual monitoring report. This considers how the plan is progressing. So it's being monitored every year. We submit that normally at the end of October, and we'll be submitting the next one soon. And once that's submitted, again, I'll bring that back to committee. We'll give you a presentation to show some of the highlights of it. So the next two categories are efficiency and quality. So just to give you a bit of a flavour, we as an authority determined 12 major planning applications last year, none of which was subject to an environmental impact assessment. Each application took on average 287 days, 39 weeks to determine. This is up on the previous year of 187 days, which is 27 weeks. But 92% of the major applications were determined within the required timescales, and this is up from 83% the previous year. So that's obviously a positive. And across Wales, prior to COVID, that was 68%. So, as I've said, officers try and add value on major schemes. We get schemes in that we don't always think are acceptable to start off with, but we think they can be made acceptable if changes are made. And rather than seek to refuse, which will add to overall timescales for developers and frustration, waste time and effort dealing with appeals, on these strategically important schemes, we look to add value. So we could do this differently, but the key thing here is whilst it takes time, we often reach a positive resolution, which is in the interest of everyone. And as you can see, developers are happy to wait if they get the application approved rather than refused. So last year, we determined 808 planning applications, each taking on average 105 days, 15 weeks. That is slightly up. It's one of only two fair indicators. So the previous year, we were 99 days. We were a week quicker last year when determining the similar amount of applications. But as I said, the Welsh average was 77 days. So, yeah, we don't just focus on speed. We do focus. We try and give timely decisions, but make sure we make the right decisions, quality decisions. So 88% of all planning applications were determined within the retired timescales. That's up marginally from the last year. We were 86 last year. And there's been a significant improvement on this, over the years going forward. So this is a real, it's really important to do that. The next focus, so as I said, that is within agreed timescales. We still need to make improvements and focus on improving our 8-week figures. So those are the statutory determination figures. But we are talking about things that last for hundreds of years potentially. So it's important we get it right in 9, 10 weeks, then get it wrong within 7. That's the approach that I take, and as I said, officers as well. So we did have last year one senior vacancy for quite a significant part of the year. What that meant was that people were stepping up and undertaking more complex applications than maybe they had the experience for. It's great for development for officers, but it does mean things take longer to do and people require more support. Now, as I said, thankfully, we are in a better position now, but that will be reflected next year rather than this year. So, in terms of quality, Planning Committee, you guys made 22 planning decisions last year. that accounts for 3% of all decisions the Council made on planning applications last year. It's consistent with the previous year. 4.5% of these member-made decisions were against officer advice. So last financial year, you voted against officers on one application, which is great from my perspective because it shows you support and trust us and what we're doing. That was an application for a HMO, and it was allowed at appeal subsequently. In terms of last year, in terms of appeal, we had 25 applications that were appealed and planning applications appealed. That equates to about 3 of every 100 applications that are going to appeal. Of those appeals that were decided, 72% were dismissed. So that's effectively saying the decisions we made were the right ones. So the guidance is basically 2/3, 66%, slightly up from last year, but we're on that. So that's positive. And we also had 9 other appeal types, of which only 2 were allowed. So again, very high percentage, 73% being dismissed. And one of those was an enforcement appeal where they applied for planning permission and got it. So we couldn't do anything about that because, as I said, we got to the stage where they won't apply for planning permission to us, but they did it at appeal. So you'll see at the bottom there, we talk about costs to you guys and the implications of not being able to act reasonably or be able to evidence the decisions we make. So we had one cost decision awarded against us last year. That was not a committee decision, that was an officer decision. Now, we had one of our technical consultees object to an application because of a lack of information. We speak to the officer. Are you happy to support a refusal? Yeah, without this, we can't refuse or say there's no impact on X. That's fine. At appeal, before we got to appeal, their technical officer spoke to ours, and our technical officer removed their objection. We weren't aware of that. Now, what it meant was we'd acted unreasonably because we put a reason on that we couldn't evidence, and therefore we had to rescind that reason. That was unreasonable because someone's gone to the cost of doing that. So that's one cost decision against us last year. In terms of engagement, as I'm sure you'll be aware, we allow all members of the public to address Planning Committee. We have an officer on duty to provide advice to members of the public. So we've got a face-to-face presence in the information station on Mondays, and we also have a duty officer on Thursdays. Requests for information outside of these goes to the duty officer. And we've got an online register of applications, so all planning applications can be viewed publicly by members. They can access and track progress of the applications. Now, finally, enforcement. You'll see they are red. They've been red for a couple of years. But we investigated 367 enforcement cases last year. That's up from 222 the year before. So despite dealing with more cases, we have also investigated more within time. So we're up to 55% from 37%. That's positive. But there's still room for improvement. And the backlog of cases has remained stable. So notwithstanding we've had an extra 150 enforcement cases, we've determined them, got through them. The average time taken to take positive enforcement action. So positive enforcement action is from the day that we get a complaint into us. Either the breach has ceased, we've served an enforcement notice, they've submitted an application for planning permission. So as I'm sure you're all aware, planning enforcement is not a quick process. It doesn't just respond to something and shut it down straight away. There are processes we've got to follow, we've got to act reasonably, we've got to try and resolve things informally. So, as I said, we've got this benchmark now that you'll see the 2 white boxes at the bottom. We weren't recording the data. So historically, we've got no benchmark for what it is to compare ourselves again. So this is our baseline now, and next year we'll have a baseline to try and improve on. It won't always happen because, as I said, some cases are already significant, several years old. Because, as I said, we have built up a backlog of cases since COVID. So, effectively, as I said, from my perspective, the performance is good overall. As I said, I'm happy in terms of what it is we're doing. But there are areas for improvement, obviously, and this is the point of this report, to show where the areas are. So one of those are the average time taken to determine all applications. That's 105 days. We should be trying to get that down. We want quicker decisions, as I said, and it's about making sure that we give people advice clearly at the outset, and if something is unacceptable and is going to remain unacceptable, we might as well refuse it. If we can improve it, we will. We need to determine major applications quicker. As I said, that's another area for improvement. The problem with some of these are we do have historical ones. You know, we've got some applications from 2022 we're still negotiating on. When that comes through, because, as I said, we're giving people the opportunity to address, when that comes through, that is a considerable timescale. But, as I said, the other two there are the enforcement ones at the bottom. We need to get those up, firstly, into fair, and then start moving towards good as well. So the recommendation is to endorse and publish the report. That's my recommendation. Have members got any questions?
Councillor Pym?
Thank you, Chair. I did notice in the pre-application income that there's been a drop of around £10,000 over a 5-year period. Are you finding that less people are going through the pre-application process? And is there any reasons as to why the income has dropped for that process?
Yes, less people are seeking pre-app, seemingly. That's where we are getting less money in for pre-apps. Now, I think there's probably a couple of reasons for that, if I'm honest. You know, as I said, I have seen a decline even in the planning income since about December 2022. It's various things, I suppose. The cost of building works, you know, war in Ukraine. There are various global issues that are impacting on people building. So I think we're seeing less planning applications come in, less major applications, and probably people thinking, I'll just apply rather than put a bit of extra money in beforehand. So that would be my view. We are seeing that, though, yes.
Chair, can I come back?
Yeah.
Yep. I've experienced a lot of negative comments with regards to the pre-application process from local residents who I've engaged with since becoming a councillor. They feel as if the process is awkward and a lack of communication, clear communication throughout the process. And they felt that the comments that passed on to me have been that they felt frustrated, that there's not been clear lines of communication, it's been a slow process, and on completion of the pre-application, they don't feel as if they're any more knowledgeable or clearer as to what's expected of them. So at some time in the future, could maybe a review of the pre-application process be taken, and maybe a consultation with the public to gauge their feedback and how they think that the pre-application process and planning could be improved?
Yeah, so just in terms of that, as I said, note your comments, and if you've got examples, by all means. As I said, planning is a technical vocation. As I said, it's not always easy to put things in simple terms for people, but we try to do that. But the Digital Centre for Public Services Wales are undertaking a review of the pre-app process to see how lay people experience it effectively and how clear it is to do. So that is being undertaken, and we are watching that to see whether we can learn any lessons from it. So yeah, as I said, I'll keep my eye on that. But if you do have specific examples, by all means, pass them on to me and I'll have a look to see whether we could have been clearer or what we could do differently, by all means. Thank you.
Andrew, do we still publish leaflets on the planning guidance to
So most of the leaflets are produced by Welsh Government because there's a lot of information that relates to all types of, it starts off with permitted development rights, what householders can do, and those are general rights applying to everyone across Wales. So there are technical guidance on what you can and can't do, but we also have our own supplementary planning guidance and things like that, and things to help. Biodiversity, ecological enhancements is a key one. What do people need to do if they need to do an ecological enhancement? Just giving simple advice for people to be able to pick up, give us that information, yes. If we identify something to help people, we'll try and do that.
Okay. Councillor Jordan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, cheers, Chair. Thanks. Andrew, just on a quick one, on the enforcement area, what strategies are you using it, or procedures are you using it to try and get these levels back into the fair mark then?
So, with enforcement, we've had historical issues in enforcement. As I said, there's been the team historically were basically, we've got the East and West teams, and each team had 2 enforcement officers. With the backlog, historically, we've tried to use agency staff. That hasn't been overly successful. And we've also had one position that was really difficult to fill. It was vacant, it was filled for 2 months, someone left. Enforcement is for specific people. Certain people love enforcement, but you always start off in the middle of a complaint. Someone's done something, someone's complained about something, you're in the middle. So we changed in the grade, we created a student position. So every year we've got a student planner coming in focusing on enforcement. And we're in the 2nd year of that now, and that's been really positive. But that does mean that we've got a senior officer having to shadow them and spend a lot of time with them every year. That's the drawback of it. But last year, we've got through a lot more cases, 150 more cases, which, as I said, very positive. But we're giving officers more information on their cases in terms of when they're coming closer to the 84-day deadline. And I'm raising this with my team leaders, they're raising it with their staff to make sure that things like this we'll share with officers. Look, this is the performance last year. We need to improve. And it's about looking at different ways of doing that. So we're trying different strategies, and I'm confident there's been some improvement, but we still need to go further to continue that improvement.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one question, the other one is just a comment, really. In regards to the pre-application, you say there's been a drop in that. How does that compare with the retrospective applications? Have they increased? So are developers developing, then applying for a retrospective application rather than come in with a pre-app meeting, which would cost them, yet the retrospective one wouldn't cost them if they get the planning application? So
I haven't done any research into that, and I couldn't really do it because effectively all pre-app does is before you submit an application, tell you whether something may or may not be acceptable, outline the policies you've got to consider, etc., etc. You can just go straight to an application and submit your application. So you don't have to do anything retrospectively. You just submit your application and chance your arm that you are aware of what you need to do and your proposal is acceptable. So I don't think there's a direct correlation between someone not having pre-app and a retrospective application, because if you've gone down the route of doing something without seeking planning permission in the first place, you wouldn't have applied for pre-app advice before not applying for planning permission, if that makes sense.
Yeah, okay. The other one was just a comment in regards to what you said in regards to, what was it, to do with, I'll have to come back to it, I've forgotten it now. I should write it down. Okay, I'll come back to it.
No worries. Thank you, Councillor Cox. Question?
I was interested, well, first of all, I thought that the first point to make is that, I agree, obviously it was quite a pleasing report to read, and I'm aware that, I'm always struck by the sheer volume of work that goes through the planning department. It is enormous, and the measures that we've heard about this morning obviously show that all many things are handled well. I was interested in this issue of qualitative assessment of performance. That is this council, is that the norm in planning departments? Are there accepted measures of quality? I mean, presumably quality is the manner in which we deal with the public in getting the process through, the actual quality. The important part, obviously, is that this quality is going to be standing there, or lack of quality is going to be standing there for hundreds of years, maybe, in terms of the quality of the building, etc. And I'm just surprised there are no sort of national standards, or are there? And the other thing that I just wanted to ask about was that in the council's corporate plan, engagement with the public and consultation with the public and being in partnership with the public is a really big issue. And obviously the council is just in the process of going through a public consultation in terms of its general performance. And I'm just interested to know if anything related to planning comes out of that, which might, relate to the quality of the work.
Yeah, we're on hold at the moment, so I will wait to see if everyone online comes back before answering, because I might say things differently twice. The quality and whether there were any Welsh national metrics. There aren't. It's very difficult to gauge the qualitative aspects of what it is we do. There's a push for that some things need to be recognised, because, as I said, if you submit an application to me, do you want a refusal in 7 weeks, or do you want an approval in 10, 12, whatever that may be, if we can resolve and overcome the issues? So there aren't any recognised measures. Certain people, as I said, and sometimes it will come down to the decision of senior officials or members and what they place emphasis on. As I said, we can give you quick decisions, but they might be refusals, higher appeals, more workload. That's not the way we want to operate. We want to provide a good service, which, as I said, if you come in for pre-app, we can hopefully resolve some issues. If we can add value, look, you can reduce the impact on that neighbour by doing X, Y, and Z. Your scheme's still acceptable. You get your approval, impacts less on them. So there's different ways. There's no easy way of doing it. We are looking, I suppose, collectively across Wales. There are certain people, certain authorities who will do what we do in the same manner, because they're looking to make the best decisions rather than quick decisions. So there is a balance to be struck. We want good decisions quickly, obviously, but there's no easy set metric for what it is we're doing. In terms of the customer contact element, as you're aware, we already have to consult by statute with residents. We go beyond that already. We go beyond what we need to do. But we're also looking at customer contact, how people interact with us, whether we can improve it, whether we can be clear in what we say. So yes, we are looking at that to make sure that the service we provide people can access the people they need to speak to.
Thank you. Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. LDP, Andrew, you say now it's taking or going to take longer to come to some conclusions. Is that going to be produced on time for Welsh Government, or are we going to be late going submitting it?
Sorry. We're behind the revised delivery agreement already. The Welsh Government are aware of that, and informally they acknowledge and accept the rationale behind it. So we've spoken with officers, we keep them updated on where we are, and we will have to provide a revised delivery agreement again. We'll have to get that agreed with them about setting out how we're going to do it. We're still waiting some first key information at the moment, but once we've got that, we will give them an update on where we are and work out when. So the next stage is we will be bringing to you the deposit plan. So this is the plan that we're saying. This is the plan that we'd be happy to put out for adoption. But we've got to consult on that for 8 weeks. So that will be the next stage. We will bring the deposit plan to you guys and seek comments on that, and then we'll go from there. But we're just factoring in the timescales at the moment.
The other thing, Andrew, was you mentioned about a number of issues need to be improved. Can you assure us that when doing that and improving the turnaround, that we don't make mistakes and get costs awarded to the council or going to appeal?
Yeah, and this is the balance to be struck, members. And as I said, just having quick decisions doesn't make them good decisions. That doesn't mean it's quality decisions. So if I can explain my rationale to you and you accept it, that sometimes things take longer, but we get good quality decisions and you're happy with that, I am happy to keep that. So I always want to improve. I always want to get those timescales down. But my personal and professional view is that it's not just time over everything. We've got to balance that. So if we see impacts elsewhere, because we're making, if we refuse more applications, we'll see more appeals. That undoubtedly. Now, as I said, that might then mean that we lose more appeals because, you often get the borderline situations where if you just do this, this and this, I can support it. But if they go to appeal on that, and it is borderline, someone else in wherever, at Pedu, might say, well, actually, it's okay as it is. They don't live here. This is what we do. We have to pick up the pieces after some appeal decisions, and we've got to make sure that, we keep as much control over decisions as we can, would be my view. So that's what I do. But as I said, if something starts going as a result, then we'll have to review what it is we're doing.
Not only pick up the pieces, but pick up the costs as well.
Exactly.
Thank you, Andrew.
No worries.
Thank you.
Councillor Pym.
Well, thank you, Chair. You mentioned in your report there's experienced recruitment issues. There's different reasons as to why that's taking place, but one thing that was mentioned was the competition that you face from the private sector. Within other local authorities, how do the salaries compare of Newport? And are we competitive? And are we competitive enough that we're going to attract the best candidates currently?
So since I've been in post, most job adverts that go out across planning authorities in Wales, public sector, get sent to us. I will circulate to officers because that's the way we do it. There are opportunities available to people. It's how I got this job, for example. I was made aware when I was working elsewhere. Now, when I get those jobs, I look at how competitive we are. I would say we are relatively competitive, not far off. Some authorities have career grades, which gives a bit more scope to progress without having to do certain things. And some authorities are outliers. They pay a lot more than us. They, from experience, I would say, tend to be the smaller authorities, which probably struggle with recruitment more. But across South Wales, recruitment in planning is a massive issue. It has been for the last couple of years, definitely since COVID, because the public sector have more, they started to work in, all the benefits of working for the council beforehand, a lot of them the private sector now offer. So they will remain an issue. We get planning is becoming more complex. Every day there's something added on we've got to consider. There's more need for planners, which is great, but it does mean there's increased competition. So we keep an eye out for what is going on elsewhere, but I can't just change the structure or pay simply because someone else is paying more.
But is there more merit in the argument that as a growing city, we've seen that our population is growing, and across the board there'll be more demand for services and more housing and development? Is there an argument, Chair, that we could go back to the Welsh Government and seek additional funding for the planning department to see if we can improve the service for the people who are moving to the city and the people who are looking to develop in the city?
So in terms of planning fees have, we found out 2 weeks ago that planning fees have been increased. It's been on the cards for a while. Welsh Government are talking about full cost recovery, which I would still say is a misnomer. But the last time planning fees were increased was 2020. Planning fees will be increased considerably, by circa 50% from December the 1st. So we will get, you'll note in the budget that we are subsidised as a department corporately. So we're not going to get to full cost recovery for quite a while, but we are closing that gap. Now, as I said, I would love to reinvest that myself. That's not my decision to make in the grand scheme of things. But I couldn't necessarily just say, I think planners here should be getting paid more. I would say that across Wales, and not just here, my view as a planner. But we would look to see what we can do. And in terms of recruitment, what I would say, we are looking at other ways of doing it. You know, we've got student planners in. We're showing them how the virtues of working for a good public authority. We have, you know, as I said, we've used those to cover maternity leave. There's a lot of benefits to them and us. We've got 3 student planners at the moment, which is very, very important from my perspective.
Yeah, but just collectively, again, whether we can do this as a committee is whether we can request for additional funding for a growing city. If year after year that we're seeing the expansions of development and new housing and more people moving to the city, then surely we need a better service and more staff to provide that service across the city.
I think we can pass these comments on back outside this meeting room. Okay. Thank you, Chair. Maybe your last question from Councillor Jordan.
Thanks, Chair. Andrew, how come we still allow people to start building when they haven't gone through an application? Look at that, the one incident we had with BP Rolls. You mean the fact that the factory burnt down, and then they built a new factory, and then they didn't put a planning application in, you know, and it was granted. You know, that's a big, massive, you know, problem that could have been really for the local council as well. So how come we're allowing people to build or without putting an application in?
We can't. Effectively, people have a right to submit a retrospective application. Everything's done at their own risk. So if someone went and built something that is unacceptable, then we could, and we have, made people bring things down. Now, in that case, it was a replacement factory. I suspect, I might be wrong, they just thought, I'm just replacing like for like. You know, that's what certain people think. They might have been unaware they needed planning permission. But in that case, we considered the application and it was acceptable. So we wouldn't be taking enforcement action, because enforcement action is always the full stop, effectively, where through negotiation, they haven't done what we want them to do. We want people to regularise things where they can, give members of the public the opportunity to comment, bring it to a decision in a forum like this, if needs be, and then get the right decision. But it's not about penalising people. It's all done at their own risk. They're putting a lot of money in sometimes to do things, and we've just got to consider, is that acceptable or not? Sometimes it won't be, sometimes it will be. In that case, it was. So we wouldn't have taken action. We just advised them, you need permission, submit an application. And sometimes these things take time because they've got to get supporting information or X, Y, and Z.
Thank you. If that's all the questions. Yep.
On to...
Thank you.
Hang on, sorry, no,
sorry, have we gone?
no, I got another report to present.
Oh, you've got another report.
I find my committee. Yeah. Can't share my screen. Hang on a minute.
If you could stay on the line, councillors, we've got another report. Just having technical issues.
It's kicked me out. Thank you, members. As I said, there's a bit of a delay on the screen. There we go. Right. So this is the second report I'm bringing today. Excuse me. It's the Section 106 Annual Monitoring Report. So the Council historically published a report outlining the previous year's Section 106 planning contributions received and spent within the previous year. Until last year, this was just placed on the website and was not reported to members. However, as I said, we do look at what other authorities do, and we do review what it is they do and how they present things. And we have seen other examples of good practice where further information is set out in terms of what contributions have been secured, what have been received, and what have been spent. So we provided this information to you last year, and it was very well received. So this is our second report in this format. As I said, if members have feedback on what they'd like to see, do something differently, you'll note it's very comprehensive, but I will run through it now with you. As you'll be aware, Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act allows the Council to enter into legally binding planning agreements or planning obligations with a landowner in association with a grant of planning permission. The obligations are termed a Section 106 agreement, and these agreements are a way of delivering or addressing matters that are necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. They are increasingly used to support the provision of services and infrastructure such as highways, recreational facilities, education and affordable housing. So, between the 1st of April 2023 and the 31st of March 2024-25, I got the wrong dates there. A total of 21 planning permissions have been granted, which have been subject to Section 106 agreements. So this is the first page of 2 of these. It's the second page, actually. That's the first page. So the sum secured, you'll see on the right, is the obligation that people are going to be paying to the council. And the second column in is what that money is being provided for. So the sum secured in total is £199,350, just over half of which is for highway improvements, a quarter is for leisure contributions, and the remainder is for affordable housing provision. You'll note 2 big sums there. Celtic Way, there's a sum of £104,000. That is towards new pedestrian and cycle routes associated with the former Quins radiator site. You'll also notice just below it a sum of £52,000 for leisure, for upgrading the Sorrel Drive and or Glasclwch play area. And on the next page, so that's the first page, these are all in your report. As I said, these are all just excerpts from that report. You will see additional sums of money brought in for affordable housing. Now, on that, you'll also note there are a number of dwellings to be created, and those have got an asterisk in front of them. Those schemes are 100% affordable housing schemes. So they're more than the policy compliant position that we require to make them acceptable, but as they're 100% affordable, at the present time, they're not required to contribute towards education or leisure. Now, we are seeking to change that, but what you'll see is we've also, last year, got 119 dwellings approved that are affordable housing units.
So there's two tables on this page. The first table is the Section 106 money received and spent. So as I said, what we've just talked about is the contributions secured in the last year. The top table shows the money received, the contributions received from previous years potentially, and that totals £1,425,000. Now, we have also then spent £2,614,000. I'll show you the next table of what that has been spent on effectively, but that just gives you an idea of the sums that have been secured by the authority and spent by the authority last financial year. In terms of process, when money is received by the local planning authority, the planning contributions manager, who's on the call now, liaises with the relevant departments to advise them that the funding has been received and whether in full, in total or in part, and then meets the regulatory thereafter check on progress. So departments draw this down as part of their capital programme when the schemes are committed. What is important to note, because as I said, if we don't spend funds within a certain time frame, effectively, that's normally 5 years, we have to return them, because effectively what we're saying is those funds cannot be demonstrated to be necessary if we haven't spent them in 5 years. But no funds were returned last year. The bottom table shows the Section 106 rolling account. Now, this shows what the Council currently holds, which is close to 9.55 million resourcing that is from Section 106 agreements. Now, what you'll see is that we have allocated or committed £4.53 million of this to schemes within the capital programme, and there's a further £5.02 million unspent and uncommitted, with just under 60% of that ring-fenced to highways projects. So full details of these projects are listed in the report, which are historical. Section 106s broken down into the sums received, committed and spent. You might say there's very large sums uncommitted. Now, sometimes those sums are not in full. You know, as I said, developers have cash flow issues. They will give us contributions at different trigger points, and sometimes we need the full amount before we can go and undertake whatever works we are meant to be doing. So just because there are big sums that are uncommitted, that is not necessarily unusual. The planning contributions manager will speak to client departments to advise them we've got the funding and that it needs to be allocated. So this just gives you, it's in your report, but it gives you a flavour of what some of the expenditure in the previous year was spent on. So I'm not going to focus on everything. As I said, you can read it yourself. You can have some questions as you want. But almost £300,000 was spent towards school provision and accommodation for the Whiteheads development at Mendlegeef Road. Circa £250,000 was used towards classroom refurbishment at St Julian's School. Subsidies of circa £50,000 were provided for Cot Hill and Glanllyn to subsidise buses and public transport. Circa £110,000 was given for a new equipped play area and changing rooms at Lisbury Recreation Ground, and circa £50,000 was brought in for affordable housing at Cot Hill. So this is an overview of the Section 106 contributions account for the last financial year. We will continue to provide this going forward and refine it. Again, members are asked to endorse and publish the report, and I'll hand over for any questions. Thank you.
Councillor Pym.
Cheers. Thank you, Chair. Just looking through some of the 106 contributions, for the size of Cynllunio campus, there doesn't seem to be a huge sum of money donated, or not donated, but transferred over for the 106 money. Is there any reason for that? You've got provision of 2 new bus stops in Lodge Hill. I mean, that's a major development, and the houses that were built and sold in that area, and I know that Steve is a ward councillor for Cynllunio. In comparison to some of the other figures, that seems to be quite small. There's also, from what I can see, very little commitment to environmental projects, such as playing fields, parks within that Cynllunio campus development. Could you offer a bit more information for that?
I'm not familiar with the specifics of that application in particular, but every application, we have to make sure there's a demand for it. So any Section 106 has to be necessary and reasonable. Does that development cause any impacts that need to be mitigated?
Well, at Cynllunio campus, there was playing fields, there was a leisure centre, a fairly new leisure centre that was still functioning and used by most of the local community. That's been knocked down. The playing fields have been removed. And so Cynllunio as a ward has lost that, and it doesn't seem to be replaced. I mean, bus stops are great, yes, they're needed, but that seems to be quite a small proportion of 106 money, considering what was lost when the campus was closed down.
I'll need to look into that and get back to you, Councillor.
Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Can Andrew say, are there any 106 agreements which have not been agreed on at the moment? Or how many?
In terms of that are not being signed at the moment or awaiting signature?
Both?
I can't off the top of my head. Al might be able to provide further information if I hand over to Alan Lowe, the Planning Contributions Manager.
Okay,
Sorry, I was looking at Cynllunio campus then. What was the question?
Are there any 106 agreements which have not been agreed with the developer at the moment?
The only one that is sort of got a slight fly in the ointment is the development at Hendra Park Drive in Ringland, the old open hearth pub. There's been an issue around delivery of play space that we're sort of negotiating on at the moment. That's the only one that I can think of at this present time.
Okay, thank you.
Just on the, I don't know if I can come back on the Cynllunio campus.
Yes, please, Al.
Discussion. Aside from the sort of the highways monies that were allocated for it, there was also £1 million set aside for secondary education. And there was 350,000 set aside for off-site leisure provision. I think they're currently doing a consultation on that for potential development at Coldbath Road. And there was also provision of on-site play for that development, including the Leap and a kickabout area. And there was provision of monies to deliver that as well.
Okay, thank you. Alan, can I just clarify that the Ringland Section 106 is still out consultation? Correct?
Are you talking about the open hearth pub?
You're talking about the open hearth?
Councillor?
No, it was on about the general with the the open hearth, and also what with the medical centre and the new housing developments in Ringland, because there's a lot of work going on in Ringland.
Yeah, there's. I don't think there's nothing else outstanding on the Ringland Centre. It's just the open hearth pub at this present time.
Okay. Councillor Rheoli?
Thank you, Chair. Just looking at the 50,000 plus subsidy and the 46,000 plus subsidy that's been applied, who makes that decision to actually allocate it there?
So the provisions of the Section 106 have been agreed. That will be for infrastructure then to put a case together about what that goes towards to subsidise the development.
So who would make the final decision to give £50,000 bus subsidy and the £46,000 bus subsidy. Who's the decision maker finally that would grant that?
Can you advise on process, please, Al?
Yeah. So the sums agreed in our heads of terms. That's then agreed at committee. Post decision resolution, so the agreement's signed, and then the terms are in the legal agreement. So it'll be each individual service area that decides then. So highways would actually make the decision on the bus subsidy contributions, and they have to go through the capital bid process. So I'm effectively sort of act as a sort of the gatekeeper, if you like. So the capital bid form has to come to me for me to sign off to ensure that they're spending the money correctly in accord with the legal agreement. But it's the service area that is responsible for the delivery of that scheme.
I'm gonna make a comment. I don't want you to. You don't have to comment. Thank you, Al. Investing £50,000 and £46,000 in a subsidy for a bus or a service doesn't hold any long-term benefit for the community. So therefore, it's very short-sighted, in my opinion, and I'm not quite sure whether it represents value for money.
I can slight.
Sorry, can I just come back on that? Sorry. The whole rationale for bus subsidies effectively is they are paid in instalments when developments are progressing. Now, the aim of them is to embed public transport very early on before there's a critical mass of houses to support the development and to support the public service. So that's why we tend to get bus subsidies. They will be for a specific period of time, say 10 years, for example, by which time that development will have progressed. Say Glanflyn, 40,000 homes, we've got about 1,300 on there, for example. We need to get to a critical mass of people to start using that to make that service viable. So that's why we provide the subsidy. That's why it's agreed in planning agreements and provided. It's not ongoing. It'll be for a set period of time with the aim that when we get to a certain point, the service funds itself and becomes profitable effectively. That's the rationale.
If it doesn't, yeah, I get the rationale. Bus service uptake is pretty appalling in a lot of areas, especially the rural areas, because we don't have enough of it at the right time. So I'm not quite sure whether it's money well spent. I get the rationale. I understand that. It's just a personal statement. But thank you anyway for the explanation, guys.
Councillor Pym?
Sorry, Andrew, can you just confirm, so what you're saying is that with these developers, that you wait until they've built the houses until the 106 money is then spent within the area to improve the facilities or the resources?
So depending on what kind of infrastructure is provided and how critical it is, depends on when we get that money in. So, for example, a 100-home scheme, if they needed to undertake works to the access, the junction, directly into the site, it's integral, then we'd require that up front. If they can show that, as I said, as this development increases, then the impact increases on said junction, then we've got to be mindful of their cash flow. These developers, as I said, we're talking, you can see the sums of money we're talking about. They don't just have that sum of money to provide up front. So it's accepted practice. We get it at a point we feel we need it.
So there is the risk that the housing development could be open, people move in, but there's no facilities in place because they've not been built yet?
Sometimes, yes. Yeah. Now, we will be clear. All we can do is set out what the impacts are to you as members on an application, when you will likely get something. So with play facilities, if it's on site, you can provide those relatively quickly. You know, they're often a site that's used for set site compounds, for example, because they're not building on them, so they can leave them there. And once they get to a certain phase and move those compounds on, they provide the play facilities. But we need to see what the impact is and how long we think that's likely to be.
Okay, this might not be a planning issue, it might be more of a placemaking concern or request. Is the old RTB Lamwern playing fields, which backs onto the large Lamwern development, nothing has yet been done with that. I can't see any funding that has been either dedicated or committed from any of the information in front of us. It's a massive area. Old playing fields that are now disused and fallen into complete disrepair that serves Newport East, most of Newport East, where they are absolutely desperate for playing fields to encourage sport and activity, and also to help the local teams that are established at the moment that are struggling for playing pitches in that area, changing rooms, play facilities, indoor space. Ringland, Orway, Somerton, Liswary, and then the people who have moved into these new developments, that they've got young families, and there's no local, well, there are local teams, but they're struggling to exist because they've not got these playing facilities, and it doesn't look like there's anything going to happen anytime soon. Shouldn't we? I don't think we're going to struggle in Newport for developers. I mean, we got new builds all across the city. We're a growing population. We're a place at the moment where people want to invest and develop. Can we change the conditions of planning and maybe get a better commitment or speed up the infrastructure and the resources, especially around environment and play? And so these are in place for when these developments not only get to certain stages, but we've got the commitment from the developers that they're going to take place, because that's a huge development in Lamwern, and I don't feel as if they've really invested in Newport East and the communities that are on the boundaries and the borders of these developments. And I can't see any commitments within any of this 106 money that's going to change anytime soon.
Okay, just specifically on Glantlyn, because I'm aware of this. The report we provided talks about contributions we as a council are receiving. That's the money we're going to get in to do works ourselves. As part of Section 106 agreements, we can also require developers, so if there's a need for a school or play provision, to provide those facilities. Now, in Glantlyn, the area you're talking about is secured for leisure activities. As I said, there needs to be a clubhouse on there. There are specific requirements in the Section 106 for that planning application, specifying what they've got to provide. And they've got to provide certain things, and then they've got a choice of 3, whether they provide tennis courts or a bowling rink, for example. So that is specified in the report. They do have to provide it. Off the top of my head, I think it needs to be provided by a specific date, which I think is 2030, or occupation of about the 3,500th dwelling. So we look at viability on all these schemes. Now, this is a major scheme we're talking about here. There's a lot of complexity about it, remediation, what they can get, what they can do. We've got to make sure that they can provide the infrastructure as early as we want it as early as possible, obviously. From their perspective, they want it when they can afford it, but it's also a draw to people moving in that these facilities are going to be there. You know, you buy it, you move in, as long as they're clear on that. We can't unilaterally bring these things forward.
But surely we need to be conscious of the existing communities that are already there, that have seen all these new houses being built, but they're not seeing any improvements to the area that is bordering these new developments. So I think from a planner's perspective, and I think as a local authority, we should be looking into that, making commitments to the existing communities within Newport East in particular, that we're not letting them down and we're not leaving them behind.
All I can say is that we will bring reports to you. Now, this is a historic one. As I said, it's a decision from 2010 that's been rolled forward. But from my perspective, and I completely agree, from a placemaking perspective, we want the facilities as early as possible. But what I want overall might not be physically, financially positive to get someone to invest in that site. And that's where we've got to consider, and I will bring to you a report that specifies when we're getting things and whether I consider that to be sustainable overall or not. You might disagree about when we're getting things, and that's absolutely fine. But all I can do is try and set out and manage expectations for what is required.
Yeah, Councillor Rheoli, another question?
Yes, Chair, loosely. Can I thank Councillor Pym for raising this vital issue of sporting facilities in Newport East? We have absolutely zero sporting facilities really in the Langstone area, and there's many football clubs looking for places to actually attain, although we do have a great sporting facility in Underwood. I know the land that Councillor Pym is mentioning. I played football there once or twice, and it was the old Langwern site. Councillor, as you probably know, it was one of the finest grounds that anybody could play on. So the area itself is already in, the ground is in excellent condition. Maybe this is something, Councillor Pym, that you and I could discuss as well going forward. I know that there are opportunities by, let's say, accessing money from the private sector and working together with the 106 team and accessing money outside and having that commitment from the council may bring us all benefits then going forward with regards to developing this very important, wonderful piece of ground that lies in Newport East for the benefit of everyone. Give me a ring.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Is that the end of the reports? Oh, yeah. Oh, sorry.
Questions?
Councillor Cox, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. I'm interested in, really, I think has been touched on already, that if we look at the table here, and my experience of as a member of getting involved in looking at what's happening to 106 money is obviously primarily, it's already been mentioned, the big housing development, the Red Rose site in Cynllunio. And there are actually some very large sums of money there, and it's already been mentioned. There's over £1 million has been allocated to improve local education, and over £300,000 for play and leisure. I think I'm right in assuming, in discussing this, that 106 money should be about additionality. It shouldn't be about the council using 106 money to do what it was going to do anyway. Yeah, and I to be quite frank, and I have spent quite a lot of time, and to be fair to the officer, we've got an officer with us now who I know I've spoken to. The officers have been very, very helpful in taking us the local members through the 106 money and answering questions in relation to it. But what bothers me is some of the 106 money that we can see on the table in front of us in this report is quite specific. It says, you know, it's to actually improve this access, or it's to reinstate the footpath here, or whatever. And I must say, as a member, I've been very much engaged in what's happening with the leisure money. We've had meetings with officers, and I can't have no fault with that at all. But in some other areas, and I think it's principally relating to education, there's actually no specifics at all. There are numerous examples here. I mean, in Cynllunio, it just talks about that the money is to be spent to improve local education. It doesn't specify a school or a sector or anything. And there are other examples in the table we've been given, from St Julian's, for example, or Llisweri. So there are these great chunks of money which the intention is, and the expectation of the local community is, are going to enhance what's already there. And I don't quite see, to be quite frank, how that happens, because as a local member, I have no idea at the moment on how that £1 million for education is going to be used. And surely, if this is going to work, there must be some kind of checks in the council, because if there are, I'm not aware of them, and I've not been able to discover them, which ensure that if there's a chunk of money which is under a very general heading, that before it's released to the service area, because let's face it, service areas are pretty strapped for cash, and they're quite very, very pleased to receive large sums of money to carry out their functions. How do we ensure that this is for additionality and not just a service area looking for another chunk of money it can use to do what it was going to do anyway?
So the starting point is the Section 106 agreement. We should be clear about what impact is being mitigated. Now, as I said, you'll see sometimes there might be two parks that are equidistant away from a development, for example, and it might be useful to have some flexibility about where that money is spent between those two. We should be specific, clearly. So if we were ever challenged, what is this money mitigating? What is it being used for? We should be very clear. Now, historically, we might not have been. But going forward, if you think we're not clear on something, when it comes here before you, raise it and discuss it. Because we need to be able to evidence that this money is required. And it's caused by the development. So, as I said, there's certain, they're called SIL tests. They're regularly from the SIL regulations. Are they necessary? Are they reasonable? Without this, would we refuse planning permission? It comes down to, if you don't mitigate the education need or you don't provide affordable housing, would you refuse the planning permission? So it should be set there. Now, if they're rather general, certain examples historically may have been, then we, as I said, the planning contributions manager, get a request in from the client department, and we make sure it fits in with what is required from the Section 106. As long as it does, we've got no reason to withhold it.
Okay, I'd be grateful that you just referred to a particular requirement. SIL? Yeah, I mean, if I could be enlightened as to where I can find that, I'd be extremely grateful.
Yes, certainly. So in the report, sorry. In the planning Section 106 report, in the background section, it refers to the Community Infrastructure Levy regulations on page 72. So it is the third paragraph on the page, and it specifies precisely what we have to comply with, and it gives you the title of the regulations. Off the top of my head, it's Regulation 122, but I might be out by one either side. Any more questions?
Okay. There's no more presentations?
No.
No?
So just the appeals.
Okay, moving on to the appeals section. We have pages 107 to 112, and these are for information only?
Yeah, they are, members. Excuse me. I know we were a little light on members last planning committee when one decision was brought to you, and I just want to raise it with you. This was the application at Rock Cottage in Penhow. I want to raise it because procedurally we were criticised beforehand by the applicant, unfairly in my view, and We went to the site visit, you'll recall. It was a bit there were a few technical issues about what we managed to do and when, but we did go out to visit on site, and then we came back in and we determined the application. But there were a few issues with it procedurally. It was found to be invalid at a certain point. But as I said, this was one of the applications. The first time it came to committee, we needed to pull it because, as I said, we were aware there were a lot of correspondence going out to members that we hadn't seen, so I couldn't address any of the issues raised. I bring it to your attention purely because the appeal was dismissed, and, as I said, some of these issues were raised with members, but the decision, from my perspective, is quite unequivocal. That the application was unacceptable. So it's just to make you aware, because, as I said, I felt officers were very unfairly criticised in my view. And as I said, I'm not saying there weren't procedural errors. We'll hold our hands up, there were. But officer conduct, as I said, and the right decision was made, and that's been vindicated. So I just want to raise that with your attention, because we've got more members here today than we had at last planning committee when it was on the agenda. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. If that's all, that's the end of this today's meeting.